Hello and welcome to the review of the 2023 Canadian Grand Prix. Let's start off with the teams and begin with Red Bull. It may be surprising to hear that Max Verstappen qualified on pole and won the race despite having a dead bird in his brakes. Sergio Perez on the other hand had another disappointing weekend as he failed to reach Q3 for the third race in a row as he crashed in Q1 in Monaco, qualified 11th in Spain, and last weekend he qualified 12th. Perez had a quiet race as he was behind the two Ferraris for the majority of the race, but he never managed to close the gap enough and crossed the line 6th. Perez now finds himself 69 points off Verstappen in the championship and is only 9 points clear of Fernando Alonso in third. Speaking of Alonso, let's move on to Aston Martin, who brought major upgrades to the Canadian Grand Prix. Alonso started the race second, but Stroll struggled in a wet and dry qualifying and qualified 13th, but got a 3-place grid penalty for impeding, which dropped him down to 16th. Fernando Alonso had a poor start and instantly dropped down to 3rd place behind Lewis Hamilton, but by lap 23, he had finally re-overtook Hamilton for 2nd place. Alonso suffered with a brake issue in the remaining few laps, which let Lewis Hamilton close the gap back up, but when the gap got within 2 seconds, Fernando Alonso started opening the gap back up again. Lance Stroll had a good comeback drive and crossed the line 9th, 0.03 seconds ahead of Bottas. Alonso finished 2nd and joined Verstappen on the podium. On to Mercedes, and Lewis Hamilton had another solid weekend as he started the race 3rd, and after a close battle with close rival Fernando Alonso, he finished the race 3rd. But as for George Russell, he didn't have a solid weekend. Russell started the race 1 place behind his teammate in 4th, and in the opening few laps, Russell held on to Alonso in 3rd, and was pushing hard to keep up with the Spaniard. However, on lap 12, George Russell pushed just a bit too much and hit the wall, damaging his front wing and rear wheel, which resulted in a safety car. Amazingly, Russell was able to continue but remained last for quite a few laps after the safety car came in, but after the second round of pit stops, George Russell found himself in 8th place. However, on lap 55, George Russell was told to retire the car with overheating brakes. Let's move on to Ferrari, and for once they made a good strategy call. On lap 12, when the safety car came out as a result of George Russell's crash, everyone pitted except for Ferrari and a few others. Then, when the second round of pit stops came around, Ferrari had already made their first stops, which jumped them from the lower points to Leclerc in 4th and Carlos Sainz in 5th. Despite Perez being behind the two Ferraris for the majority of the race, they held him off to finish 4th for Leclerc and 5th for Sainz. Let's move on to Williams, which is odd as they are normally the team I cover last. Albon had no upgrades for this race, and they showed as after all the grid penalties, Albon started the race in 9th. In the race itself, when the safety car came out when George Russell crashed on lap 12, Alex Albon pitted for hards like most drivers, but when everyone pitted again around lap 40, Albon stayed out. In the remaining laps, Albon had a train behind him which he was able to fend off and finish an amazing P7 for the Williams team, and Albon was also voted driver of the day. On to Alpine, and they had a pretty average weekend as Ocon qualified a decent 6th, whereas Gasly was knocked out in Q1 after being knocked out by Carlos Sainz, who was later given a 3-place grid penalty for impeding Gasly. On the radio, Gasly said he should have been banned for that manoeuvre, which was a bit hypocritical considering Gasly is 1 penalty point off a race ban. Despite his efforts to overtake Albon in 7th, Ocon finished in 8th and Gasly finished down in 12th. Alfa Romeo is up next, and Guanyu qualified last and Bottas qualified in 14th. Zhou stopped on track early in Q1 but was able to get going once the red flag was put out. In the race, Bottas lost out on 9th by 0.03 seconds and Zhou crossed the line in 16th place. McLaren hadn't scored any points at the Canadian Grand Prix since 2014, and this streak continued as Oscar Piastri finished 11th, and after his penalty for quote unsportsmanlike behaviour, Norris was classified 13th place. Haas really had a 0-0 weekend as Nico Hulkenberg qualified on the front row in 2nd, but from there, their weekend just went downhill. Nico Hulkenberg was given a 3-place grid penalty for going too slowly under red flag conditions. Magnussen started the race 13th, and Nico Hulkenberg started the race 5th. In the race, just before the safety car came out, Haas pitted Hulkenberg, but as people pitted under safety car, Hulkenberg lost out and dropped from in the points down to 15th. Hulkenberg never recovered and finished 15th place, and Magnussen finished in 17th place. Finally, AlphaTauri had a quiet weekend with Nick de Vries trying to make his own circuit with Magnussen and Tsunoda finishing in a quiet and lonely 14th place. Now that's all the teams wrapped up, let's move on to the top 3 things we learned from the Canadian Grand Prix. At number 3, I have gone with Williams are back in the midfield fight with their new upgrades after Albon's 7th place. At number 2, I've gone with Sergio Perez's Red Bull future may be at risk after recent performances, as it has now gone from out of the title fight to no Q3 or podium in the last 3 races. And at number 1, I have gone with Aston Martin as still above Ferrari and Mercedes with their latest upgrades as they were quicker than them last weekend. Let's move on to your thoughts. There was only one submission this week and it is shown on your screen now. Albon was a well-deserved driver of the day after his amazing defence on 50-lap-old hards to keep his 7th place. Let's move on to my predictions, and for the Canadian Grand Prix, I predicted for the top 3 that Verstappen would finish first, which he did. I predicted that Sergio Perez would finish second, which he didn't, and I predicted that Lewis Hamilton would finish third, which he did. Let's go through these two predictions quickly as they didn't age very well. I predicted for the surprise driver that Gasly would finish in the top 5, which he didn't. And for the DNF prediction, I predicted Albon, which he didn't. He got driver of the day. Let's move swiftly on to my predictions for the Austrian Grand Prix. For the top 3, I've gone with Max Verstappen P1, Sergio Perez P2, and Fernando Alonso P3. A very original top 3. Now for the surprise driver, I've gone very bold and predicted that Alex Albon will finish in the top 6. And for the DNF prediction, I have predicted Valtteri Bottas. Who do you think will win the Austrian Grand Prix? Let me know in the comments below, don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.